Alexithymia 2, Return of the Feelings. So I asked Dr. Don Neumann to use that title. It just made sense. This is the second Building Brain Awareness seminar she's done on alexithymia. So this recording is excellent, and it's both an excellent presentation on her part, but also there's a discussion in the recording between people who have alexithymia that I think is really helpful. The goal of this talk series is not just to put out lectures, but is to capture the nature of these kinds of conditions. And I can share that I had alexithymia. I had an inability to connect with and feel any of the feelings I was having after my brain injury for about 17 years. It's a very strange condition. And then when I tried to go to talk to therapists to try to get help, to try to learn about my feelings, they didn't understand what I was saying. It was also did a lot of harm, more harm than good, because I tried to explain to them what I'm feeling. They immediately talked about PTSD and trauma, and they really didn't have the ability to understand what I was saying. Randy, who's in this recording, was the first person who is brain injured who I was able to connect with about this, and all of a sudden you have someone to validate what you're feeling. All of a sudden you have someone to talk about who had a similar experience, and the nature of this alexithymia is different than other conditions, or at least with brain injury, it has its own sort of flavor. So other people in this recording who have a lot to share, Debbie and Nick, I've since gotten to know them, and everything that they say I thought was so important that I just had to keep it in the recording. Plus what Dr. Neumann presents, both on the characterizing and making sense of this condition and what she's developed to try to help and improve and offer people a way to train them and build a way to connect back with their feelings. These are all people who've had brain injury and are suffering from alexithymia. It's just a really great discussion. So I decided to keep the discussion in the recording. I know it's long, but it's worth it. And for me, it captures the nature of this kind of problem. So thank you.
Hi, Randy. I'm Debbie.
I know. I can see your name. How you doing?
Are
Are you also injured as well?
Yeah.
How long ago?
Depends which one.
How many have you had?
Well, do you want loss of consciousness or just, I mean, it started in 95 with a car accident, but I've had so many. I used to play hockey. I've been knocked out in that. I hit myself in the head with a golf club. Just recently, like we were in Scotland, hit my head hard on a castle relic stone thing. That's what I think led to this alexithymia stuff. So, yeah. I have like a blind spot right here that I don't see. I mean, my eyes see it, but my brain doesn't, which was why I kept hitting my head in the past. I just didn't know it.
What do you mean your eyes see it, but your head doesn't?
My vision's fine. When they test my vision, I don't know. It's just, but there's this spot.
But nothing registers.
Right. She said whatever, neurooptometrist said that it's either the wiring, it's either the nerves got damaged or that area in the brain got damaged, whichever. But that really, sorry, that's Gus. That really makes it come back.
That has or has not come back?
Has not. I still I always put my hand here, usually. I'm always it's kind of wild. Yeah. Yeah. How about you?
I'm similar. I went through a lot of concussions growing up as a kid. And I only found out about 5 or 7 years ago from my older brother who died 5 years ago that I fell down a flight of stairs when I was a year old.
Oh my gosh.
So it's sort of, I never knew this before, and it's sort of, you have one, it leads to the second, it leads to the third, yada, yada, yada.
Wow.
But in 97, I was a business invitee at a residence about an hour south of Eugene. I'm in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
And I got attacked by a dog that had been abused with electrical shock therapy from a defective underground fence collar.
Oh my God.
And I hit the bumper of a car and fractured my skull, was knocked unconscious for about an hour, bleeding from my nose. And they took about 5 years to get me to any medical attention. And it's been nothing but hell since.
I hear you.
And, life's a bitch and then you die, right?
Yeah, right? You just
Yeah,
keep
right,
going.
right.
Because the alternative would suck.
So you have a cat. 3 years ago, I went out and got another golden retriever puppy,
Oh,
and he's sleeping under the desk right
oh.
now.
Yeah, I love
And
animals.
for the last just over 2 years now, I've been training him as a service dog.
Oh,
This guy is unbelievable. It's a
smart.
it's a it's a boatload of work.
Yeah,
So I never understood how could a service dog cost 20, 30, $40,000. I
yeah.
mean, granted, it depends on what you're training them for, but now I understand it. It's a hell of a lot of work. But
Now you're like, oh, I get
but
it.
I just
Oh,
took him to Tai Chi this morning,
yeah,
and I take him to the Y, and he's
yeah.
the only dog I've ever seen at the Y.
That's
And the thing
awesome.
that amazes me is when you go to a gym, how often do you see somebody with a dog?
Right?
The
Never,
gym.
because I belong to RY and I'm
Right,
thinking, yeah,
exactly.
never,
So, but
never.
people come up and they treat him like a pet, and I'm like, what
Mhm.
is wrong with you?
Working,
There's
guys. He's working. Yeah.
how you
Oh,
doing, Don?
but you can't
Hi,
blame him.
everybody. I'm just enjoying the conversation, just
Oh,
talking about how awesome animals are.
Randy
What a
too.
loving cat.
Oh, he's the sweetheart. Yeah. Actually, the
Don,
baby
are
is,
you getting hit with the storms at all?
We just have a lot of rain. It's just very dreary and rainy here.
Well,
yeah,
I don't
me
want to
too.
hear it.
Me too.
I don't want to hear it.
I was gonna say, don't you guys always have that? My brother's in the state of
Yes.
Washington.
Where are you, Debbie?
I'm in Illinois. I'm just south of Chicago.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
so Dawn, I have a question,
sure. What's up? What are you thinking?
which I think I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask you anyhow.
Okay. I don't know that I'm
Um,
going to know the answer.
Alexithymia never really goes away, does it?
Mm.
I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. Not from our study.
No?
I don't think
I
so.
I've
I
been
think that's
changing, improving a lot. So Don, I can say that the attendees here, we all have alexithymia, and my mother-in-law got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and my wife is in China now with her. It's been a very, very slow process.
How is
But
she
that
doing
was
better
like the
with it?
most emotionally intense 2 weeks. And then when my wife left, I was relieved because I didn't have to deal with the emotions. But right now I'm at my parents' house, but I was with the kids for about, I don't know, 3 weeks, and I
Okay.
can feel my emotional gears shifting. All the things I had been working on, also emotional labeling, also being able, I look at it now, I explain it like I built a bike the emotions were like a bike that I had to like assemble the pieces from other places, and then the riding of the bike and the feeling of the bike, which is feeling and not being overwhelmed by the emotions, it has gotten better. And I know Randy's situation. I don't think you've been able to find the right help. And then it's the first 6 or 7 years of my brain injury was a cognitive rebuild. And I say rebuild because it was clear that I lost what I knew. But this, I don't think, is a rebuild. This is like a building emotions for the first time. But I've improved a lot. And it's really hard, but it's like at least I can feel the feelings now. And
About it not being a rebuild. Um,
I don't believe I had this before. I don't believe I was an 18-year-old semi crazy young man. And um,
I was
um,
gonna say I've been in the study and I don't know that I actually feel things, but I can now recognize or like label my emotions, which I think I still don't call it, but I can sense like I know what in my body sensations and just figuring that out so that I'm like, oh, that's what that feels like. Like that's what sad feels like, or that's what angry. And I think that's helping. Like it's helping something start, like you said, something's starting to click.
yeah, and the feeling it in your body is something that I
Mhm.
didn't have at all. And then when I had it, I went to a cardiologist. I thought something was wrong with me. My heart's fine. It's feeling.
Mhm.
I'm able to recognize that those are feelings in my body, and I can accept it. And it's I've spoken to several other. One woman that I met with alexithymia, I was so excited to talk to her about it. I think I freaked her out because she's like, "Why are we talking about this? Don't talk to me." So I didn't. I invited her, but I don't think she'll be here. But other than that, the feeling in the body awareness is something that I'm gaining. And
Yeah.
Randy, you and I have used the term of the murkiness of the feelings because having the awareness of what it is still something that I think you're working on, which is hard.
You know, it's been interesting. Tucker, the dog, under the ADA, the dog is supposed to be trained to perform a certain task. And ever since he was a puppy, he just intuitively, and it took me a long time to get this. Let me back up a moment. About a month ago, I was at the Y with him, and there's a woman next to me. Her back was towards me from the equipment that she was working on. And she turned around and saw him and started talking to me, not to him. One thing he had never done before is I was sitting on a called a lateral pull. I'm just sitting on a bench and you're pulling the weight. And he got up and jumped up on my lap and started licking my face and my hands. And it didn't really occur to me. She had been talking about how she didn't know you're not supposed to have eye contact with a service dog because it could distract them. And I didn't realize this until hours later. Later, that this is around noon or so, and then late that afternoon or early evening, it occurred to me that when she was talking about no eye contact, I had a hard time making eye contact with her when I was talking with her. I don't know if that's significant or means anything or not. But what struck me was that Tucker, when he jumped up on me, that was his alert that something was going on, and I didn't recognize it right away. That's happened, and it's taken me a long time to get that. This guy knows me better than I know me. So when you talk about the alexithymia, yes, there's sadness, there's anger, and they're about the only things that I feel. You know, when you and I first met, Dan, and I talked about that, you know, if this line, the flat line,
Yeah.
and above the line is joy and happiness and exhilaration and whatever other adjectives you want to use, and below the line is sadness, depression, negative stuff. It never goes above the line. I'm not sure if that's the same as alexithymia or not. To me, it's almost like my heart feels like it's dead inside. I don't know how else to put it.
That's a good way.
I've been reading about anhedonia as well, which is an inability to have pleasure specifically. And I know that you've shared that with me, Randy, and I think you've shared that on my podcast. This is a good discussion, and
It's a great discussion.
yeah, I mean, this is the stuff I'm trying to cut to, and I don't want to end it, but I could just say that yeah, I do think it can be worked on. It's difficult to do so, and it's difficult to do so without the right help. And Don Newman is presenting, that she's kind of like at that level of even researching this and discovering it. But I know Debbie and I have spoken about this as well, and I've met, yeah, about 4 or 5 people now that have this condition, and I think that flatline feeling, I was like that for about 17 years, and then it hit me that holy shit, I don't have any feelings, and it really was weird. So I think we should start now. Dr. Newman, I'll introduce you. You're associate professor, and you're at the Indiana University, and you research alexithymia. You are the person who's presented at this the most, so thank you. You get an award for that. So you're doing your third presentation. So thank you. And yeah, let's just jump into it. And I don't want to we can continue the discussion that we were just having maybe further down the line. Dr. Newman has some good research and some ideas to share with us. And I also have questions. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you guys inviting me back. So clearly I didn't scare you off too much the last time I presented for you guys. Really thrilled, like very interesting to hear the conversation that's happening and how everybody's experience. There's some similarities across experiences. There's some differences across experiences, and alexithymia doesn't always look or feel the same for everybody. And I think it is one of those things that unfortunately is really difficult to get the right help for, which is kind of one of my goals is to increase awareness about alexithymia and potential approaches to address it. But unfortunately, I don't think it is easy, and it is something that but I do believe that it does have the capacity to change and improve over time with hard work. So I guess that's, to me, I think kind of the overall positive message. So anyway, with that, I'm gonna let's see. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, Great. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to a good discussion. You guys already had some great comments. So with today's presentation, let's see, the return of feelings, just the disclosure of some of the grant funding that have supported this work that I'm going to be presenting to you today. I know I did this in the last presentation, but just to kind of as a refresher for those who attended that last session and then those who maybe did not. And so when you think about what alexithymia is, if you actually break it down by the word, it means literally no words for emotions. And as I was saying before, so alexithymia can vary in terms of the characteristics. There's certain traits that are common, and you may have one or multiple of these traits, depending on your situation. But one component, characteristic of alexithymia is not even being aware of when you're having an emotional response. So you might be having an emotional response, something might be going on internally or externally, but your awareness of that emotional response might actually be very limited. So you might not realize it. And that could be for various reasons. And one of those things possibly could be even that cognitive awareness of the physiological sensations in your body, those cues and indicators that tell us that we're having an emotional response. Another characteristic of alexithymia is maybe you do realize you are having an emotional response, but you really don't know what it is that you're feeling. So you could be lacking clarity into what it is, or you might not be able to describe it. And then kind of similar and sort of an overlap of this is people with alexithymia might realize that they're having emotional responses. And frequently when we're having an emotional response to a situation, we are typically feeling more than one thing at a time. And when we are feeling multiple things at a time, and especially if they're maybe even conflicting with each other, because we could have conflicting emotions at the same time, that could create confusion. So you might not necessarily know the difference. Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling afraid? Am I feeling all of these things? And how to pull apart those things. They just might feel like overall negativity of sensations. Other people with alexithymia might be just lack attention to their emotions. So they're just not even inclined to even think about it. They're kind of maybe more thinking about tangible things or concrete things. They're not really likely to think about how they're feeling about specific events.
Would you call that the same as as an emotional disconnection, or would that be something different?
No, I think that that's an attention component. The disconnection, yeah. Well, I guess that there could be, but I think that there's also that limited awareness of emotions. That's what I think of when I think of a disconnection between your brain and body. That the body it has one thing going on and the brain has another, and there's this, and maybe that's for both of them. There's this disconnection between what's happening and then your brain processing kind of what's going on. And then, and I think all of these things, potentially, I guess maybe all of these things are sort of this connection. I think the same thing with kind of like when you have, I think it's interesting with alexithymia from what my understanding is many people with alexithymia might have limited awareness of their physical sensations, or they are aware of their physical sensations, but they lack the ability to connect those sensations with an emotion. So they feel something's going on and it feels like this discomfort, and they might even attribute it to pain or discomfort, but not necessarily an emotional response. So these are kind of some common characteristics that could be, you might relate to. Some are multiple of these.
Talk about murkiness, huh, Dan?
Yeah, and I would add also two other levels that I've experienced
Mm,
with the brain injury because but basically the internal states with the brain injury are a bunch of other problems, inability to cognition, inability to think, inability to. So I was consumed by those things, and maybe that consumed. That's where all my attention was, so I couldn't
hmm
shift to the gear of the feeling, but the
hmm
shifting to the gear and then actually having the feeling. That was a thing that took me, I feel, 2 years to really. That's what I mean by build the bike to like feel the pain, to let it happen,
hmm
and also there was the anger, and then there was the all the pain and sadness behind it. Just having it happen in me had not, or it didn't, and it took a lot of work to get to that. So two
Mm-hmm.
distinctions there being that the brain injury put a bunch of other issues on my plate that I was consumed by for many, many.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I
Yeah,
think I lean towards like, so the three things I heard you say was one, kind of the cognitive, other things were pulling your attention. And so you were sort of distracted by these other factors that took away from your ability to attend to the emotions. So it's kind of this distraction. So I would kind of lean towards it's this not attending to or thinking about or evaluating your emotions for whatever reason. And that could be due to the distraction, the other cognitive components. Then
right.
I
Well,
think mhm.
I'll just say the reason I make that those specifics because for every brain injured person, I think they have a version of that as per their brain injury symptoms and problems. So that thing is it's like running inside of you constantly, or it's the gears of it aren't working, the gears of it are broken or at least hard to make happen. And so in that sense, that consumes our internal attention much more than an unbrain injured state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing, so then the other thing you were saying was like the not having the feeling.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and when I think about that, I think of the limited awareness of emotion. So or the limited awareness of the body sensations. I think that that can fall into one or both of those categories. That like a lot of people with brain injury will say, I don't feel emotions at all anymore. I don't feel this. I don't feel the way I should. Somebody died. I don't feel sad or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Mhm.
I completely lack that capacity. And in my mind, maybe some people literally do not have that physiological response. But my take on this is that people with alexithymia, many people, most people with alexithymia really do, are having that physiological response, and they are lacking that awareness and ability to pay attention to it, and that recognition of that presence of that emotion. So it's like we think it's common for you to say, I don't have this emotion, you don't have any emotions, but I think that what's happening is it's below your threshold to detect it. I think that they're there. It just takes more effort to to acknowledge that it is there. Um, and then or to let it out. So I'm not going to say that's the case with everything, but I think that that sort of addresses that or is part of that. And
I think
then
what you
yeah,
just
go ahead.
described, I think what you just described for me is exactly what I was telling you about with the service dog with Tucker.
Yes,
I
he's
think
Yeah.
that
acknowledging something that's in
Yeah.
you that you don't
he
realize.
yeah, he is picking up on from the changes of body chemistry, whatever, that I feel like I'm completely clueless about.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I think. I am completely clueless about.
I bet you that's true. So I think I
But
told you guys this on the last presentation that I did, that there was a guy who had a stroke that was being treated at our rehabilitation facility, and he and his wife had come into therapy, and they said, well, he completely lacks the capacity to feel after his stroke, and the question was, can you teach people who have lost the capacity to feel again? And my question was, well, why do we think he can't feel? And we essentially hooked him up to look at, like, so when you're having an emotion, typically it's associated with like an increase in your galvanic skin response, your physiological arousal. And we basically interviewed him while we were measuring his internal physiological changes and responses, his physiological arousal while we
you were
were
doing that
interviewing.
electronically, I assume, correct?
Yeah,
Right.
about like things that were really should have been very emotionally eliciting to him. Now, during the interview, he was extremely his face was very flat affect, very blunted, did not come across as he felt anything, did not say he felt anything. But internally, there were
Wow.
clearly things going on internally that he could not connect to at all. He just had no idea it was there.
Did he
And at
ever
one
get that
point,
remediated at all?
so that's an interesting question. So that's actually one of the very first instances that got me down this path of trying to develop a treatment. So at that time, I was working with a therapist to make some stuff up, and what was interesting is that he started to make progress. But because his therapy started so late, he and his wife ultimately got divorced because it was too little too late. And this is like one of the reasons why I really think it's so important early on to pay attention to these things and get intervention early. So I don't know specifically with him. I could tell you that my understanding was he was supposed to be making progress, but according to the wife, it was too little too late.
I just want to jump in with
Mhm.
that's what I mean by the riding of the bike. It's I believe I agree with your assessment and the awareness part, and then the it's happening underneath, but then the experiencing it consciously, being able to tolerate it, being able to have it happen in you has been a very difficult learning process for me. And it doesn't just happen automatically. It's not like the pool, it's like I jumped into the pool, oh great, I just had a feeling. I never had that. I can
Mhm.
literally describe the first time I tapped into it, and then it was like, wow, okay, that what is that? And then the labeling came in, and then that's sadness, that's emotional pain. But it was not a process that I was familiar with. So it took practice and effort and baby steps kind of, but very much more painful. Um, so I just feel like that in this person's example, there is something going on physiologically. Clearly, he's not tapping into it, but then the feeling it, riding on it, being on the emotional feeling is a thing that has to be learned. Or at least in my experience,
Oh
I've
yeah,
I've
yeah,
learned it,
yeah.
and I'm still
Dawn, what
working
just
on it.
occurred
Yeah.
to me is that what you're describing is sort of like, you become the frog in the pot of water on the stove.
I don't know that story.
The sadness, the
You don't know
sadness.
that? If you
But
put the frog in a
if you
pot of
turn up,
water
yeah,
it will sit there. And while you turn up the heat, the frog will just sit there and cook and die.
they won't
Well,
notice the temperature
if you
change if
take
it's
the
gradual.
frog and drop it in a pot of hot water, it will jump out.
Oh my,
Yeah,
You
but
never heard that?
no.
Oh, wow,
Never.
that's interesting.
I don't see how the frog fits as an analogy because
The
it's an
frog would
internal
feel the
thing.
water heating up, but it's
Except
so
for it has nothing
gradual
to
and
do
so
with what he's
slow
saying.
that it doesn't know that there's a threat. It doesn't know to jump out.
Oh.
Yeah.
All
Something
right, I see
along that
that.
line.
Okay, okay.
Okay, I see that. Okay, that's interesting.
But the
Yeah.
feeling, having feelings isn't like that. And Nancy said something, and Nancy has been a person who has helped me because she's an emotionally mature person. So it's like having the feelings doesn't there is threat, there is reactivity to it, but it's I don't know. It still doesn't.
I think it's
Yeah.
different for everybody. I think it
Fair
could
enough. Fair
apply
enough.
to some people. I think that analogy could apply to some people, but not everybody.
Yeah, that's
Um,
probably true.
And there
yeah.
is a aspect of the feeling that is so overwhelming at first. That was one of the
Mm-hmm.
earlier barriers in this. And I asked you that question in the last talk because I was
Mm,
still kind of getting that under my belt, if you will. But yeah, there and I think that the brain injury traumas pile up inside of us, and so it's almost like an not an assembly line, but a pile up of these emotionally difficult situations, so that when you start actually feeling it, a lot more is going to spill out.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, they're getting
Yeah, yeah.
Oversharing.
I'm
sorry.
sorry, were
Sorry,
you
Nick.
saying something, Nick?
I always feel like I'm oversharing what you said when I get in these emotional states. I share too much information. Um,
In terms of how you're feeling?
yeah.
Mhm.
You mentioned something earlier about how I have a brain injury and I have some scar tissue in my temporal lobe. And I've spent my whole life, I didn't have my injury until 31. Um, and
Oh, you're
recently
still
I've
young.
been watching movies and I've been trying to focus and like use my working memory to process the scenes and get and understand the emotions they're expressing and what it's projecting for the characters to do in the situation. And if
Huh.
I get a scene, I have to turn the movie off because it's that much processing power on my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just
Do
wondering,
you get fatigued from that or
I think my
flooded
brain's
or how
searching
would,
for words to describe the emotions. Because I had a physical, an OT who taught, speech therapy.
yeah.
And it's really trying to get the words to attach the emotions so that I can anchor them down to the memory. That's what I think anyway. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So is it recognizing other people's emotions or your own emotions, Nick? Or both?
I mean, it's whatever I recognize as possibly being their emotion.
So other people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and a lot of this, Alexei, that like your ability to recognize your own emotions is often connected to your ability to recognize other people's emotions. And we actually currently have a study right now where we are, and we have an intervention, where it's another teletherapy study where it's called Intervention to Change Affect Recognition and Empathy. And it's teaching there's 12 sessions. 7 sessions are just teaching you to recognize emotions through facial expressions. And the last 5 sessions are teaching empathic behaviors and responses once you recognize the emotions, how do you respond empathically? And it's meant to enroll people with TBI and we like a care partner. So basically, an eye care partner. So whoever, whether it's your spouse, your friend, your sibling,
Mm.
your child, your parent, or whatever. So I don't know if that would be something you'd be interested in, but we can.
It's kind of just solo right now, but
I would.
I would too. This is Olivia. 100%.
I don't.
I
Do you
was
guys
in
live
it.
in?
It's good.
You were in that one,
I was in eye care too. Yeah.
and so you were in both.
Yes.
Oh, Dad.
I know. I really think if I hadn't done the first one best,
Yeah.
I would have struggled even more with eye care.
I think so too. And well, that is my ideal
Mm-hmm.
kind of sequence, is to do exactly what you, that is really cool. Thank you for doing that. Daniel, I will send you the flyer for eye care. I will say I don't know, because I know some of you guys are in Oregon or Washington. For some reason, we can't do this therapy with anybody living in California. So as long as you don't live in California, we could screen you to see if you meet our screening criteria.
I live in Texas,
Oh,
so
good. Okay. Yay. Okay. Yeah.
So what
I
is
can't.
eye care and best? Because you did describe that, but the acronyms always throw me off.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, Daniel. Sorry. I feel like I
No,
assumed
no
everybody-
worries. I mean,
Yeah, no.
yeah.
So, best is building emotional self-awareness teletherapy. It is specifically our alexithymia treatment delivered through teletherapy. It's not what I'm going to be reporting on today, but because we're still currently in the process of the trial. But it's teletherapy. And so that's specifically teaching you to improve your emotional awareness and attention to your emotions and labeling of your emotions. Eye care stands and best is for people with mild TBI only. And that's almost over. So we basically almost have fulfilled our enrollment. Eye care is for people with more moderate to severe TBI, complicated mild. I don't want to bog you down with that. But anyway, it is an intervention to change affect recognition, so to teach you to recognize other people's emotions and empathy. And that's also done via teletherapy, and it's a 12-session intervention. So one is teaching you to recognize your own emotions. The other one is teaching you to recognize and respond to other people's emotions.
It sounds a little bit like the thing that Nick was describing. He's been working on by himself. And,
right. That's why I brought it up.
I wrote a lot about this back in when I was in the university before the injury. I studied philosophy and the philosophy of the self. So it's me sort of touching base with these ideas. It's so great to see that that's thought by other people.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up, because I just wouldn't have even thought about it. So it sounds like it's an interesting resource for others. So thanks. Yeah, so yeah, so many great comments. So I guess we should, moving on
yeah,
from here. I think,
get into
yeah.
whatever you want to show.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand that alexithymia is extremely common after traumatic brain injury. There's, depending on what research you look at, it can range anywhere from 15 to 60% of people with TBI. But if you even take that really low part of that percentage of 15%, and you think about the worldwide cases of people with traumatic brain injury, at minimum, that means that about 10 million people, new cases of people with TBI have issues with alexithymia each year. So it's really alarming when you think about it. Now, one of the things in this, you guys kept kind of commenting on this, and Daniel, you were, and all of you kind of were bringing stuff up with about this, that it's not specific or only for people with traumatic brain injury. So you can have alexithymia as a result of a TBI because parts of your brain that are involved in processing emotions could be impaired, could be involved, and be damaged, or disrupted. That can have an impact on your ability to process your emotions. But also, we learn to process and think about and label our emotions typically from a very early age, but there's a lot of cultural factors about maybe how you were raised, how your family is, how you were raised. Some families are very much, let's not talk about emotions, let's not think about emotions, like pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just, get over it and don't cry and whatever, just do what you need to do. And if you kind of were raised in that type of environment where you weren't encouraged to think about or talk about your emotions, you may have aspects of alexithymia. Now, people who maybe had childhood alexithymia who were not encouraged to think about their emotions, it's possible they then have a brain injury, and now that brain injury further exacerbates those alexithymia difficulties and stuff. And then also alexithymia could result from psychological distress or trauma. Now, obviously, most people who have a traumatic brain injury, that in itself is trauma, physical trauma, but psychological trauma as well. But then there's other people who could have other aspects of psychological trauma that was not physical at all, but maybe through rape or some really disturbing situation that could cause one to kind of disconnect from their emotions, become emotionally numb, and that will give people alexithymia traits and characteristics.
If we're listing the traumas, I don't want to forget one other one then. If you had a brain injury and your actual injury may or may not have been very traumatic, the subsequent traumas of life when people don't understand what you're dealing with, I think that one is common amongst every brain injured person I've met, except for like 2 people, which was really cool to see. But it's like the difficulties of life-induced trauma, and then you just don't want to feel anymore. Oh, I believe I've observed that in many people.
Yes, I that makes a lot of sense. So basically you're saying, so you have your TBI, you may or may not have alexithymia, but then you're exposed to all these challenges, misunderstandings that lead to this psychological trauma that you just give up. You're done when you're tired.
Well, and you're brain injured, so you can't do certain things, but then the people don't understand you. That's one that is that's a big issue.
Yeah, definitely. So the importance when you think about, emotional self-awareness is really, when I think about it, it's fundamental. It's the foundation of us being able to then in turn acknowledge we're having an emotional response. We're in some sort of distress. We then need to regulate our emotions, decide how we're going to do that, manage those emotions, and then it leads to good psychological health. Alternatively, so if you actually have alexithymia, so you don't have good good emotional awareness, and you have issues with alexithymia, you're going to be more prone to emotion dysregulation, low resiliency, poor coping, maybe even pain catastrophizing or psychological catastrophizing, which then can in turn lead to kind of these more stable issues, affective disorders like or mood disorders of depression, anxiety, issues with anger, aggression, PTSD. And then here's a new one for you. So I'm going to throw this in here. I'll only spend a very little amount of time with this, but then if you are having these emotional issues and emotional problems that you're not able to overcome, or you're not processing through those in a healthy way, these emotions could then surface as pain. So a lot of people with alexithymia in the non-TBI population have been known to have chronic pain and worse pain intensity and interference.
You mean physical pain?
Well, that's actually another can of worms because I think that there's the tension trauma release storage in our body that is with brain injured people, but it's not dealt with, and that the traumas don't stop. That's an interesting one to characterize.
Yeah, it is a whole nother can of worms. Maybe that'll be a future presentation, but I am just going to very briefly talk about it today. So
Great.
just in terms of like what the gaps that we have right now and what we know about alexithymia after TBI. One, like I said, this is that chronic pain relationship with alexithymia is pretty well established in people without TBI, but it has not been examined in people with brain injury. So that's one gap. Another gap is, even though there's been a lot of research that has shown alexithymia to be associated with these problems of emotion dysregulation, anxiety, depression, and anger, those correlations don't necessarily mean causation, because if we look at them at the same time, we don't know if anxiety is if the alexithymia is leading to anxiety, or is anxiety leading to alexithymia. I'm having so much anxiety, I'm just going to shut down and go numb. So we don't know which one is causing which. Right. And so that's a gap in the literature that I'm going to talk about a little bit today. And then I'm going to talk about one of the trials that we did for our alexithymia intervention, not the teletherapy one, but an in-person trial. And then I'm going to just give you a little bit of feedback from the teletherapy version in terms of some qualitative feedback that we got from some people. And that teletherapy version it's for both civilians with TBI, as mild TBI, as well as military participants with mild TBI. The first study, and this is not going to spend a whole lot of time, I just want to share some results. We did look at the relationship of alexithymia with pain. And we examine alexithymia with pain intensity, pain interference, and
Do you have
headache
slides?
frequency.
Do you have slides for this to jump to?
Yeah, so I'll get to that. Well, it's not a whole lot. All it is essentially saying, so one of the major components of alexithymia is difficulty identifying feelings, and that is a subscale on the Toronto Alexithymia scale. And essentially, we looked at this relationship between difficulty identifying feelings with pain intensity, pain interference, and headache frequency, and saw that, yes, they are significantly correlated with each other. I did not want to get into too much detail because we're still undergoing some analyses, but what we think is that this relationship between alexithymia and difficulty identifying feelings is not necessarily a direct relationship between them, but we think that if you have difficulty identifying feelings, it's going to make it harder for you to overcome psychological distress. And that psychological distress then in turn turns into increased pain intensity. So you're going to have more severe pain interference, meaning that your pain interferes or disrupts your ability to engage in daily activities, complete daily activities, and leads to more frequent headaches. So this is very, very, very early on, and we still have a lot more research to do. And
Almost
we
like an
collected,
endless loop.
to some degree, it could be.
I want to add to that model, and I wish we could draw it out, but I think that the brain injury problems, which are there and multiple and each different for each brain injured person, but that leads to the psychological stress, that leads to an inability and problems and other internal problems, let's call it, and then that like fits into your model as well, and
That, and I
partly
think
the source of the
that's
anxiety, and then the emotional shutdown. Either I can only speak for myself, but I don't know if maybe in the beginning I didn't have an awareness because of literally the brain injury things, and then over time it changed to a more the one you described. Because initially it's like this is black and white, these gears do not exist in me, and later it was that long list that someone else had said, yes, I had that, and I also had that, and I don't that list is too long.
So I think that this is the simplified model. Like, again, like going back, I think we're finding evidence to support kind of this relationship. So it's like if you have these what we're seeing. So what we saw is that alexithymia, the blue box, definitely is correlated with this chronic pain, pain intensity, pain interference, headache frequency. But what some of our other, we're also looking to see basically what might be what we say kind of what is that mechanism, or what is mediating, what's helping to create this connection in between these things.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the slide. Can you put the slide up so that we can all see it? For the
Wait, are you not seeing the slide?
I was seeing still the first one. Is a problem every time with the Zoom, it makes it harder to control it.
Stop sharing.
Yeah.
Screen share. Sorry about that. I did not realize that was not
Yeah, I'm sorry, James, it's a good discussion. I agree with this model to some extent. Yeah, thank you.
There
Thank
we
you.
go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's working? Okay,
Yes.
so this was the model before of the different types of alexithymia, the different characteristics that we were talking about. I just wanted to make sure, so bringing you back to this, what are the characteristics of alexithymia? That percentage of people with TBI who suffer from alexithymia, the origins of alexithymia could be neurological, aka TBI, your childhood upbringing, your psychological distress, how emotional self-awareness is fundamental, the foundation for good psychological health, and then how alexithymia can be contributing to problems with emotion dysregulation, lower resiliency, poor coping. That could
Okay.
lead to these affective, more like depression, anxiety, anger, aggression, and then that in turn together can lead to chronic pain, pain intensity, and pain interference. So that's kind of the theoretical model of what we were testing here. And then I said, these are the 4 areas that we are trying to address through our research, examining relationships of alexithymia with pain, looking at whether or not alexithymia is predictive of worse emotional functioning, and then looking at some results from our in-person trial.
Right. So if you go back to the one figure before that and add the brain injury problems as a list of internal problems for each person,
Oh, no,
it can be
over
leading
here.
to a lot of this too, and
Yeah,
it
please.
intermixes. Thank you. Yeah, and so yeah, with the slides, it makes it easier to
Right
follow
here.
for
Right
me.
here.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. And also, what you were saying, I think we were all relating with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
Have you done any work around any of these issues? And I'm trying to think of how to pose the question. Um, Meditation or any of the contemplative sciences and how they have
No,
impacted any of this?
I have not. No, no.
That's what I'm wondering about is how much any of that may have a positive impact in remediating any of these issues.
We do, yeah, we in the intervention, we do some body mindfulness, like being mindful of
Right,
your
right,
body
right.
state. We do some of that, a very limited amount of that. Yeah, but beyond that, not anything in depth. I do want to, because I'm just looking at the time, I want to just make sure that I'm getting through the content
Yeah,
here.
okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's always such robust discussion with this group. It's easy to get carried away. So with that first study of us looking at these relationships between alexithymia and pain, what we are seeing is that if you have difficulty identifying your feelings,
Mhm.
there is a possibility that you are also going to have issues with pain and like feeling more severe pain, more likelihood that your pain is going to interfere with you completing daily activities, and you might be more likely to have frequent headaches. So there is a correlation between these things where you have more work to do to understand what is driving this relationship. But there's a researcher at Wayne State University. His name is Mark Lumley, and he does all of this research on chronic pain in people without TBI and alexithymia. And he has an intervention called emotional awareness and expression therapy. And basically, when he teaches people to be more aware of and expressive of their emotions, these people with chronic pain show significant decreases in their pain intensity and interference. So I think it's an interesting possibility that that also might help people with TBI who are suffering from pain.
I think the gears of feeling it and learning it through another person, because that's sort of let's assume that evolved in us as an important aspect to interact with other people and feel their feelings. Anyway, the feeling it and observing it and having empathy happen towards the other person is going to get those gears working in us about ourselves. And I do think that there's a huge tension trauma storage with brain injury that would then tap into that, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Because
and it could go both directions. A lot of people say that you need to have it within yourself to have empathy for other people.
I don't agree with the chicken and egg thing at all, because
Mhm.
the chicken is the brain injury. It's a giant chicken. It's invisible. It's in my head. And I've been organizing it, characterizing it, writing about it. That's the sort of direction I'm going with all this, because it's like,
Mhm.
it's not chicken. It's a giant elephant. It's a herd of elephants, you know, and it's something that I've managed for the last 24 years, and I've gotten really good at that. Given that, it's like that's what's leading to these other factors, and then the outside world is observing those other factors. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I need time. Yeah, I need time to process
Well,
that
because
one.
like what Randy said, the flat line, that's how Randy and I related about this. This was 2017. And I would say that before that, my life was black and white. And then the emotional stuff, I added the grays and then the colors, which is a metaphor for explaining what you're talking about here. But it has made it far more intense. And it was almost easier to not have feelings
And
because I had
why?
so much else going on that was the brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I look at it. Anyway.
I do want to put up, so I have up on this slide some of the items from the difficulty identifying feeling subscales. This is that subscale that correlates with pain. And so just kind of if these are things that might resonate with you guys. I don't want to spend too much time. I just thought I would throw that up there for you guys to think about.
It's very important to say that the pain is connected with this. I agree with that. In the literature showing that is kind of growing.
Yeah, and that is definitely what we're hoping to do, is to continue to explore that. So so stay tuned for more work there. The next thing I want to draw the attention to is I said that we did another study that, remember, I said that there's been a lot of work that has shown that alexithymia is correlated with anxiety, depression, other just difficulty regulating emotions, but nobody really knew or understood, or we don't know which one leads to what. So there's a lot
what
of
you just said is basically implies that it's all a linear relationship, and I'm not so sure that that is quite accurate.
what implies it's a linear
That,
relationship.
that this leads to that, and that leads to this, and so on and so forth. That, I mean, the description is somewhat linear in how it's being described, and I'm not. I mean, Dan, you've talked about this a lot. The system.
Yeah. I don't think it's linear at all.
Nothing. There is no such thing as an isolated system. They're
Oh yeah,
all
no.
deeply integrated, and so I don't. I mean, I just don't. It just hit when you just said that. It just struck me that I don't know that this is linear. That it's linear.
I think I'm maybe oversimplifying, and I'm not trying to say that everything is linear, but also the data, the analyses do show that some of the data are to be treated in a linear fashion.
Okay.
So there is that, but I'm not saying that there's not other factors that are impacting these things. Also, with that in mind, what we wound up doing is, so we did this research study where we looked at people at 1 and 2 years post brain injury. And we looked to see if their alexithymia at 1 year post brain injury predicted their emotional functioning, their psychological health at year 2. What we wound up finding with this, and so this is a very simplified version of the results that literally is just hot off the press. We just have a paper right now that was conditionally accepted showing this, where so we are looking at alexithymia and it significantly predicts. So the higher or more problematic your alexithymia is in year 1, it predicts worse anxiety, worse depression, lower perspective taking, worse emotion regulation, lower resilience, and more suicide ideation at year 2, significantly, while controlling for these things like anxiety at year 1. So you could say, well, this is how this person was functioning with their anxiety at year 1. You control that and you see how much is alexithymia and other factors. So we controlled for sex and injury severity and other factors that potentially could influence emotional functioning. We controlled for that in the analyses. And still, after those factors were controlled for, alexithymia still significantly predicted these functioning.
What are the X's? Those items.
The X's just mean that it did not significantly predict it. So even though we found correlations between it after controlling for everything, it did not predict
really
the
changed.
outcome.
Okay.
Right. So it might be related to these things where we found a correlation between alexithymia and these things, but year 1 alexithymia, when controlling for other factors, did not predict this outcome. So it just means that those other factors with the X, there's other things that are having a bigger impact as to what's contributing to those. Whereas for this, alexithymia is at least playing these other factors in green with the yes, that's playing an important role in how people are functioning later on in their life. So to me, what this says is if somebody has alexithymia, if we get in there and we intervene early, we potentially could be preventing worsening, exacerbating of some of these problems later on. So then the next study I wanted to talk about is our intervention study. So this is the pre-BEST study. This is what we call TREAT, Training to Reconnect with Emotional Self-Awareness Therapy. It was an in-person trial with people with complicated, mild to severe traumatic brain injury. And we just finished, it was a 5-year trial. We just finished it. And essentially we wanted to look at differences in people after this intervention, both immediately and 3 months after their treatment, in their alexithymia, their emotional awareness, and then their emotional regulation, anxiety, anger, depression, affect, and global impression of change. So that's what they perceive to be of change in their emotional functioning. These are the inclusion criteria to be in the study. They had to be an adult. They had to be greater than 1 year post brain injury. They had to have adequate speech comprehension, et cetera, to participate. And they had to have moderate to high alexithymia on one of our main outcome measures. These are outcomes. I'm not going to belabor that, the measures. So as far as the treatment goes, the treatment is 8 sessions. That was 60 to 90 minutes long, and it was one-on-one between the participant and a clinically trained RA or a research assistant who was trained on this intervention. It's a very structured intervention. And there were take-home exercises. The first 4 exercises were psychotherapy and lots of exercises. So basically psychoeducation and then exercises, and then lessons 5 through 8, you were given activities to help practice the skills that you were taught in lessons 1 through 4. So this is what sessions 1 through 4 touched on. Eventually, like the first lesson really dug into why do you need to get in touch with your emotions? What are the values and the benefits of it? What the difference is between vague emotions versus specific emotions. And then we introduced emotional vocabulary. And then session 2 continued along with emotional vocabulary. We also talked about what the difference is between emotions versus thoughts, actions, and physical sensations. And then using those thoughts, actions, physical sensations, TAP, teach you to use those thoughts, actions, and physical sensations to tap into your emotions. We talked about what emotional arousal is, indicators and signals of emotional arousal, and then how to link those signals with an emotional label. And then lesson 4, we talked about how do you pull apart when you're feeling many emotions at once. And then we talked about anger. I know we talked earlier that anger is very common, and like maybe you don't acknowledge or recognize other emotions and how that sort of overshadows other feelings, and so how you can get in touch with what you might be feeling besides anger. So those are like the things that we focus on through all those 4 fundamental sessions.
So did you have a part to that practicing actually feeling it?
So
Yeah.
so the idea actually feeling it is detecting your emotional arousal and putting a label to it. So feeling an emotion is this experience. It's an experience of basically understanding that feeling, like, oh, I feel sad. That's that acknowledgement of what is the arousal, the physical sensations in our body. It's that label. It's that whole experience is taking all of that and putting it together. So we're touching upon all of those things. That is the feeling.
Yeah. But as a brain injury person who had lost that, there's a so that's why I feel like there's a piece of it that with brain injury it got injured in me, and I
Mhm.
believe other brain injured people have that too, because it's like the pieces, totality that is more than the pieces, that may or may not be able to be experienced or tolerated.
I think from the skills that we're teaching them,
Yeah.
the participants that are a part of this, these skills, like, so you're like, oh, I wasn't able to feel it. So are you teaching them to feel it? All of this together are the skills to help elicit you to be able to feel it.
Right.
There's
And then
not just this one lesson that says, here's how you feel it.
Yeah, because it's like, I think when we think of emotions as like our old way of feeling, but I think we were able to connect those, the thoughts, the actions, like in your body's physical response, and we automatically knew what we were quote unquote feeling, what emotion we had. And I think that's what that tap thing, I use it a lot because it's not comfortable and it's not easy, but it's helping me get that process back. That's the emotion, right? Like she said, all together. So even if I think I'm not feeling it, I am having the emotions. So you're having emotions. You might just not, you
Be
just
aware of
need
it.
to work at figuring out what it is or how many there are. Does that make sense?
I didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
If you don't feel it, how do you know that you're having it?
You're having, well, that's what I learned. You
You're-
always have emotion. Always.
You're paying attention to the things. So
Yeah.
you think that you're not. What we're teaching you is that these things are indicators, your thoughts, your desired actions, your physical sensations, your arousal, these are all indicators that you're having an emotional response. So if you come in this day and you're like, I don't have emotions, I don't feel it. What I'm saying is that these are what it is that we're teaching you what to pay attention to. We're saying you do have these emotions. You're just not realizing it. You're not recognizing it because you're not paying attention to the important signals and those indicators. And we're saying these are all of this together are signals that you are. And we're teaching once you realize, oh, I need to pay attention to my thoughts, my actions, my physical arousal, my this, and then I put a label, say, oh, well, this might be an indicator I'm feeling this, or this might be an indicator I'm feeling this. Then you realize, wait a second, I am having an emotion. I didn't realize it. And the other thing we spend a lot of time talking about is because your arousal is really your physiological arousal is a key indicator something's going on. Like the second I get tense or I get flushed or I get hot, like these are it's an indicator something's happening. And a lot of times we're not thinking about that. So really learning to realize what is your baseline physiological arousal. Like when you're totally at rest and everything is calm, cool, collected, what is that baseline arousal feel like? And then you learn to acknowledge whenever your physiological arousal deviates in the slightest from that, it's a signal something's happening. And so what we try to do is lower your threshold to then say, oh, I recognize I'm feeling tense in my shoulders. I feel like my breath has changed. I feel kind of, bothered, like right. So it's like you start to realize some of these things, and it's you're never going to learn all of that from this hour-long presentation where I'm trying to I'm giving you a high-level overview of the things that we touch upon, but there's no way in this session I can teach you what we teach people in 8 sessions.
No, I wouldn't expect that. And this level of discussion is exactly what I think is missing. So it's very good. So thank you for sharing it at that level.
I think Nick has a question.
Yeah.
I was just saying I have an analogy that I've been trying to use to understand this. And if I may share, I would like to.
Yeah.
Before my injury about 4.5 years ago, I was studying machine learning and could program my own retrievable action generation system, which is when you have data that's trained in a particular way and it recognizes the same answer. It becomes second nature. So I can always get it to scan the text and find the proper names if I train it on data sets. And over the course of my life, I've been training my mirror neurons to act in situations, roles where the emotions are appropriately fit to the character and role that I'm playing. And after my brain injury, I feel like my mirror neurons were just shattered. And watching shows and getting what y'all are offering to teach people to reprogram and retrain their mirror neurons to recognize emotions would help the intelligent model the ego, the way I look at it, with that basis. I feel like this pain loop you're describing is when that retrievable action generation system is statistically always under 50% accurate. And it causes me pain,
Mm,
never being right. And I get so mad at myself.
Mm.
And then
that's
I have to
interesting.
meditate. So yeah.
That's that's very
A lot of
interesting.
frustration
And
with
Nick,
that.
as you break
Great
it,
analogy.
yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. And as you break it down to those components, as per your modeling analogy, can you explain what do you mean by mirror neurons in this case? Because is it seeing and reading their feelings, or is it something more?
Yeah. Uh, when I see it in this TV show, I can the pain and suffering associated with my narrative is terrible. I was a personal injury attorney and was hit by an uninsured motorist. So it's like just stacks on that. So I like to step away and look at TV shows, and I have to understand how others in the world interact. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
and I
that's
think just to
a
add
lot.
on to that, like in the literature, I mean, some people call them mirror neurons, not everybody like refers them as mirror neurons, but I know what you're talking about. Like, so there's research to show that if you're observing other people,
Mhm.
and their emotions or pain, there are certain neurons in your brain that will fire to almost kind of indicate that you might like there might be areas your neurons might be firing that are
Yeah,
part of the brain that's having the motor movements of your face
yeah,
smiling when somebody else is smiling,
that's
or the pain
interesting.
area of your brain kind of might light up if you see other people in pain, or like, so they're called mirror neurons because it's like this emotional contagion.
Clusters.
You're mirroring what you're observing in others, and that helps you to kind of feel and understand what other people are feeling.
Nick, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, it hasn't happened in a long time. I guess it stopped, but there was a period of time where I would be watching something, a movie or some stupid show where somebody gets injured or hurt, and I would physically feel the pain that they were going through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what you had just described.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, that dissipated at some point. Why? I have no idea,
I
but
think
it
you have
did.
to exercise it, and I think you have to work on it. And I've arrived at the empathy part of this whole thing in pain differently because of my sort of rebuilding my emotions by forcing it almost. It was weird, but I just want to
Are
say
you
that the components that you're talking about is all very I don't know, reminding me of why we use feelings, why we have feelings, and then really connecting with other people to work on it. Sorry, there's a helicopter here. It's going to be a hard process.
mm-hmm.
It's very difficult. It's very painful. It's really hard to do anyway.
Yeah, so the
That's on
ability to
top.
work on it has to be done at at a very conscientious level,
Yes.
and that in and of itself is sort of an oxymoron to this whole discussion.
Yeah, well,
Well, yeah. When we work with people with this, I mean, people come into the study with this inclination, they want to work on this. And I think what we're doing is bringing attention to and conscious effort to these things, that I think for some people, not everybody, before their brain injury used to just happen without effort. It just happened. And
Right.
not everybody, because some people didn't, but like now there needs to be a conscious effort to do this. It may
yeah,
become habitual again in the future, but it takes time.
I was just thinking, yes, yes, and yeah, it's this whole process has not been comfortable. It felt awkward, but the more I do it, a little less awkward. So it just kind of fits with everything, everybody.
Yeah, and
So
it doesn't necessarily, yeah, if you especially
you
even
have
done
to
this if you
work.
your whole life, it's not necessarily going to feel natural, right?
Yeah.
So, and even if you don't talk to other people like this, I think it's that internal dialogue that you have in your own head. No, I was actually asking Olivia. I keep seeing your video coming on and off. Are you good, Olivia? Did you have any comments that you wanted to add?
I think I'm just in a terrible Wi-Fi situation. I'm really
Ah,
sorry about
no,
that.
no, 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 no worries. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't trying to ask a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Are you guys seeing the slide I have up now? This is vague versus specific. You are. Okay. So if you were going somewhere and you were given a map, would you want the map on the left or would you want the map on the right? You brought probably the map on the right. And
Depends
so
if
when,
you're in outer space or not.
Yeah, it
yeah,
depends
right.
where I'm at. It depends where
The
I'm at.
conditions.
All right,
Being from New
smart
York, that was
asses.
100. Yeah,
If
that's
you're in
my.
outer space, I'd take the map on the left.
All right, we're not in outer space unless you're super rich, but okay, so or an astronaut. So no, when I think about it, the importance of using specific labels. If I say I came home from my job and I just got fired to my husband, and I say, and I'm feeling pretty upset and bad. What does that actually mean to you? Bad and upset could mean a lot of different things. But if I say I came home from my job and I just got fired and now I'm feeling ashamed because I must have done something to get myself fired. I feel angry because I felt like it, because it was unfair. I feel worried because I don't know if we're going to be able to make rent. I feel disappointed. But I'm also a little bit partially happy because I hated that job anyway. Like this could create a much more robust conversation with your partner or whomever, or even for you to know what to do with that information of losing your job. These emotions and understanding what it is you're feeling, why you're feeling it, is going to help you to make your next steps. And it's going to help others to understand what you're going through and help them to work with you. So this is the importance of really using these vague words on the left. They're okay. We use them all the time. I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying that if you're talking with somebody, a good friend, family member, a therapist, it's going to be much more helpful to get more specific in terms of what you're feeling.
Hmm.
Say that again, please.
Saying that you can use these vague words to start off and think about how you're feeling, or if you're talking with some random stranger at the store, how are you? I'm okay. I'm, good, whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like if you're talking with somebody who is an important person in your life, a family member, a spouse, a therapist, whomever, use or even yourself and the internal dialogue that we have with ourselves about what we're feeling, these labels are extremely important to be more specific, to help us understand what it is and navigate through a situation based on our actual feelings and what we're really going through.
Gaining even that perspective, it doesn't happen or it's very hard to happen. So that becomes an exercise.
And I think a lot of that has
Yeah.
to do with the loss of self that occurs from the injury.
Yes, well, that is one of the elephants in the herd of elephants that's internal problems. You're not yourself anymore. You also
Right.
can't think. You also have double vision. You also have fatigue. I'm
And
like,
you're
what
living
do
with
you
a
do this?
stranger inside of yourself, and you don't know how to
Yeah.
even negotiate whether you want cream in your coffee or not, so to speak, or whatever analogy you want to use.
Yes.
But this,
That
I
loss,
think,
but
yeah,
that
but
loss
all of
of
that is
self
driven.
is is fundamentally so profound that,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But I hope that, and I don't know, I understand, the loss of self, this isn't directly touching on that, but ourselves, who we are, is so much driven by the emotions. And I think if this is really
you're
helping
right,
people to get back in touch with those emotions, that's what I'm
right.
hoping this does. It
That
gives you,
becomes a circular.
but it's supposed to help that, this idea that you're right, so your emotions is gonna, do I want cream in my coffee? Well, that depends. How is cream in my coffee gonna make me feel? Well, if I don't have any feelings about it, then I really don't know if I want it. But if I could relearn this feels pleasant or unpleasant, this feels good, it makes me feel better, it's going to help you make decisions who you are real, so there is this reconnection. And so it's really reestablishing a
Yeah.
lot of these things. Yeah. So anyway, and then I know before, I've talked about, even just the specific labeling, we talk about that when we think about labeling how we're feeling, it engages the prefrontal cortex, and how this helps to minimize some of the intensity of the unpleasant feelings that we might be dealing with at a particular time. So these I think, Daniel, at one point I talked to you and we were talking about like, well, I know I'm having a feeling, but I'm like, but you need to learn how to label those feelings. You need to specifically spend time putting a label to what you're feeling. And if you don't mind, I'm going to requote you. You said it's kind of like, you know, if you start labeling these feelings, it's almost like this catch and release of emotions. I have this emotion. I don't know what it is. Well, now I'm going to put a label on it. Oh, well, this is going to actually help to minimize or lessen that negative experience. And it's just like I can now let it go, right? I have it, I processed it, and I can move on.
Let's say the first 7 years of my brain injury, the intensity of the other problems was so important that it didn't matter cream or coffee. It didn't matter the feelings because I needed to think, I needed to do, I needed to act. And then as those problems went away, eventually the emotions got on the radar. But like you can live when you have the alexithymia, you can live with those feelings because there is no intensity to them. They're not there. They're not in your awareness. They're not present. And
They're
it's
not in your
all
awareness. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not present. It's not in
fine,
your
but
awareness.
in your reality of the moment to moment, they're so far from being on the radar or on the
It's
threshold.
easier to navigate the world with what
Yes,
you're talking about,
it's a
Dan, as
different
opposed
gear.
to
You're
not
a
having the
robot. Yeah,
cognition, which
yeah.
is so fundamental to being able to navigate the world.
I'm not saying that's a good place, but
Right.
that's the way that that was, and then that changed as the other capacities of problems became less on the radar,
Mhm.
and then the feelings is really intense. Also, this discussion has helped me think about the thing I've built is like, the pilot when he gets in, and now I'm aware, now I'm in the feeling, now I'm actually having it. That was something I didn't have and had to build and practice, and that had an overwhelming part, and this isn't happening. This just doesn't happen part. So once you're in it, maybe other people have that fluid in them, and so the rebuilding of the other things on your list, they're just in it. But for me, I wasn't. It was really
Mhm.
weird. It wasn't happening. And then it took now I'm feeling, and then there's a lot of pain there, a lot of emotions, and
Yeah, sorry. I do need to get moving because I
Sorry.
yes.
actually need to get going.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
We've had a lot of really great discussion. And I don't want to, I guess, get too much into some of the intervention components, but I was just kind of sharing some of those pieces so to give you a flavor of what things we touch upon throughout the intervention. 34 people when I'm completing the trial. Most of the people who started the intervention stayed in the study. Several people dropped out of the study before the intervention started. This all happened over COVID, and then we had the in-person trial. It was such a pain. Anywho, when we looked at the results of this study, we looked at changes compared to baseline immediately after the interventions and then 3 months after the interventions. And we looked to see what changed. So we saw immediately and 3 months after, we're seeing significant changes in alexithymia, emotion dysregulation, anxiety, depression, and negative affect. We're seeing improvements. These changes are maintained for almost 3 months. But the other thing that we're achieving these changes in emotion regulation, anxiety, depression, anger, negative affect. Well, none of the intervention teaches you how to change your emotions. It just literally teaches you how to be aware of them and to label them. And so to see these changes makes me have hope that if people have the skills, the awareness and the labeling, that those are important skills to put them in a better position to regulate and manage their emotions. And the other thing to notice here this is our characteristics of our sample. On average, people were 44 years old, 61% were male. But what was important here is on average, people were almost 12 years post their brain injury. 8 sessions of an intervention, on average, 11 years post brain injury, and these are the changes we're seeing. I think that's pretty
Wow.
exciting.
Yeah, that's
That's
very
pretty
exciting.
impressive, actually.
And that's awesome. I wonder how the numbers would change if in the first year of your brain injury versus the 10th year, things are very different. So maybe it is good that you're working with that.
Yeah, I guess so. Right now, the best study, the teletherapy study,
Yeah.
it's mild TBI, and there's have to be a minimum of 6 months post brain injury. My concern about doing it is within the first year, especially after a more severe TBI, is is because, like you said, there's so many other things that are taking precedence. Like you just might not have the ability to attend to or like focus. And there's a lot of abstract information in this intervention. And so like I worry that the first year just might be too difficult to do
Too
some of
much too
these
soon.
too much too soon. So, I don't know. I think it's an interesting question because I think the earlier you get started, the better it could be for preventing some of these outcomes, for
Yeah.
So I don't
But
know.
but that's the sort of point that I was trying to make before, is that in the first week, let's say, there's going to be a lot more things on the person's plate, and they may not be fully conscious. And then in the first month to 6 months, they might have more of that, but their fatigue is going to be so overwhelming. So those are like the brain injury problems that continue or are very hard to remediate. So yeah, I wouldn't get into emotional stuff in that first week. Maybe in the first year.
Yeah. Well, what
Yeah,
we were saying before, year one, alexithymia at 1 year post brain injury predicts emotional functioning 2 years later. So I think
right.
that 1 year post brain injury would be really ideal, like getting in there and potentially intervening and preventing some exacerbating of some symptoms 2 years later.
In
So
that National Academies of Sciences report on TBI, they talk about this evolution of the brain injury problems, but they don't get into a lot of details there. But yes, I think that it's a major factor that needs to be factored into the therapies.
How do you get
yeah.
this out into the therapeutic world?
Well, it's really interesting because I've been actually asked to present this. I've presented this in Australia, the Netherlands, but right now I've had requests for the intervention from clinicians from Australia, from Norway, the Netherlands, the UK, the United States. So right now I've distributed the intervention to about 45 different clinicians. While that doesn't sound like a whole lot, I'm actually really pleased with that just for the fact that there's a lot of interventions or treatments and studies that don't get implemented clinically years and years and years and years after they've been developed. So the fact that clinicians are excited and reaching out to me about accessing this intervention is it's exciting.
I think it's great, and it's definitely that's not a small number. Each one is planting a seed, and also I think they recognize that this is necessary. And missing. I've had a recent therapist that I got into an argument with him about all this. And he's thinking about it as PTSD, and I was like, it's not PTSD. It's not PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
It drove me crazy.
Yeah. So the more people, again, like I said, my mission is to get everybody to realize the importance of this, to evaluate their patients. Anybody who's having emotional problems after brain injury, they should be evaluating their patients for this and trying to intervene. We've got this structured program. I'm not saying it's the end all and be all, but I think it's really important. And I'm not saying this should replace psychotherapy. I'm just saying that this might be important to preface psychotherapy with and other things to give people the tools that they might need. So I think with that, I just wanted to share. So with the current best study we have, this is some of the feedback that we've gotten from some of our participants. This was a military participant. And he had said, in the context of what we were doing the last half, personally being in a profession in the civilian world where I was taught how to put my emotion in boxes so you could perform at your best when needed, and then it was added on to by the military with combat arms. One of the things for me, particularly as a guardsman, was teaching the younger medical professionals who had not been in combat at all or hadn't been in a major trauma center or burn center what their experiences were going to be like and what was going to impact them and how to deal with that. I knew that I was doing the right thing as far as the trauma teams go to maximize patient care and survivability to teach them how to divorce their emotions, at least during the time of working. But I also know that those shelves and boxes get filled up and they need to be dealt with eventually. For me, that was real in some ways, a dichotomy and an additional stressor because while I knew I was doing the right thing for what we needed to do, in the back of my mind, I also knew it would be very difficult for me because I wouldn't know how to deal with it. And so this person is really trying to get put across that like there's a time and place where sometimes you have to compartmentalize, you have to box up these emotions to get through a particular situation. But if they go left undealt with, they're going to just continue to pile up and pile up. And the next thing you know, those boxes are going to be falling all around you and falling on you. So you need to learn you need to have the tools to deal with it. Another person said, I think it is really good. And I think I told my husband he needs to do it too, because it helps me read other people. I think everyone needs to do this. I learned a lot, which makes me feel proud, and it has made me feel hopeful. Even if it is not comfortable yet, I hope I continue to use it. I'm very grateful to have done it. I feel that I have benefited a lot from it. I was under the impression, because I was in therapy before, that I already had an honesty with myself and my feelings. I see the value of just accepting my emotions. At the same time, I was a bit numb when I first entered the study. The reminding, and for me, the part of it was English isn't my native language. So I see now the meaning of words, and finding the right words was an important part. Overall, I feel that it was a valuable contribution. I wish there would be some type of job aid to deal with anger. I wish there would be some type of job aid to deal with anger in more productive way, so that I wouldn't upset people around me, because anger is the most overwhelming. I thought it was definitely useful, especially leading into the details of the feelings and the emotions, and providing tools to describe what is happening. Learning to dissect or unpack what the feelings really were as a way to deal with things. Part of that dissection also was to kind of look at the actual emotions and nuances, rather than a broad emotion like angry. Is it real anger or frustration? Is it annoyance or not real anger? I think that helped, especially since that was one of the big issues. One of the most important things I learned was that even though I didn't think I was having emotions, was learning that we have emotions all the time, and that was comforting. One of the most important things to me too was that anger doesn't appear alone, because anger is a big problem for me. That was huge. The TAP methods was really helpful. The emotional compass was helpful, learning that. I think it was really good thing. I think it was a really good thing is that it was not comfortable to do, but the practice is good because it forces you to practice, because it builds those muscles. The at-home lessons and exercises and having to talk with someone else was uncomfortable but important. There was a lot of good things, because I don't think I was paying attention to anything before, so it has taught me to do that even if it's not comfortable.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, yeah, I don't really need, I mean, we went over all of this, but yeah, and you guys, I think, have the idea of the takeaways. One of the things I did want, somebody from our study, had commented after participating in the study, they found an app called How We Feel. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. They said that it definitely, after going through our therapy, this app was very helpful. I also shared this app with somebody else who did not go through our therapy and did not find the app very useful. But that being said, figured I would throw it out there for you guys to check it out, just in case. And then some of the stuff that I've put up, I've presented on brainline.org. I'm pretty sure, Dan, that's where you found me to begin with, on brainline.org, and talking about my stuff with alexithymia. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to keep you if you have to go. I like the last quote that you said about the actual exercising of those muscles. That's the thing that is the point I've been trying to make, that those muscles, when they don't exist or they've atrophied so much, it's so strange, because it's something not other people have those muscles and think it's automatic. Yeah, we're in the trenches and you're in the helicopter trying to map it, trying to figure it out. So it's a good discussion to have.
This was
It
good.
is.
Yeah,
This was really good.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
was
I
really
appreciate
good.
it. Good. I'm glad that you found it hopefully
Yeah.
helpful. I found the discussion to be really helpful. I wish I had all day to talk to you guys. I could learn so much. So
I'm gonna go over this discussion and come back with questions, because a lot of things were said.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I do have to run. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, take care.
All
Let
right.
me know. Reach
Thank
out
you,
if you have
darling.
any questions.
It was
Take care,
all
everybody. Thanks for the
great.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. I
You're on
gotta listen to this
Medicaid.
one and come up with a bunch of questions, because there's a lot of points that were made, and also I've been trying to communicate with her with Dr. New, what I've been dealing with from the beginning, and for a lot of times she's like, I don't get what you're saying, but I think that I still see them as from the outside and observing and not understanding certain things.
They can't.
Right? No, they
Yeah.
can't, but they should back. If they're gonna try to understand it and do the science on it, they need to understand the issue. I've been calling
That
it
we
core
deal with.
problems. My brain injury gave me these core problems. I live with these problems, and I'm going around the world dealing with these internal things. And then, if they're gonna look at my emotional response, it's one of those, but it's not the only one.
I I was gonna tell you guys, the most important thing I learned, that's what I told, is like that. They taught me like, yeah, I'm having emotions. Even if I'm not aware of it, my body knows it. My body's reacting, like your bodies react, right? Tenseness, heart rate, sweating, whatever it is, headaches. Like she said, the pain thing, that was wild. But how do I say this? Like when I'm overwhelmed and exhausted, when my brain is like that, I find it, I either don't do it or just my husband has to like tell me to tap it out because I won't go there. My brain's
Yeah,
too tired. So it's interesting, like what you said about early on, we're too busy trying to deal and we're stressed and overwhelmed, right?
with
So
all the other factors
yeah,
that are major,
you don't
major
have
yes.
emotions, what do you, but they're still there. They're still there. And then I was gonna say, Randy, the whole anger thing, the biggest thing I learned there too is like anger is really high on the emotional arousal scale.
Yep.
So I was having other emotions and didn't know it, but the only one that I would know was that anger or frustration. And
It's so
until
dominant.
until I did the thought thing and started like thinking it out and saying my thoughts and like talking it out. It's not that I knew right away what I'm feeling, but when you tap, I think that's the biggest part for me, the tap thing, is that I start thinking, all right, what am I thinking? Like literally, what am I thinking? And sometimes that'll lead me to frustration or embarrassment, or there's all these things, but anger usually covers everything, right? So
Yep.
if you can just stop yourself in the moment,
That's
it
a lot
seems
easier
like
said than done.
exactly. And that's where I'm lucky my husband is here to kind of like say, hey, tap, do you need to tap? Or you know what I mean? Like he can get me
Yeah,
to
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stop.
yeah.
So even if I don't know, maybe your dog can be a clue to you to say, okay, what am I thinking?
I don't know how to describe what he has done, and I don't know how much of it is the dog or the fact that I've been through training him as a service dog. I do. He's the third golden retriever that I've had. The first two were just pets. If you had asked me 2.5 years ago if I could train a service dog, I would have laughed my ass off. I mean, I hired somebody who actually went to college for this, on how to do it. And she definitely knows her shit, no question about that. I don't know how to describe it, but the relationship that I have with this animal is very different than I've had with any other dog before. And he goes with me everywhere. Um, I don't know how to describe it, what he does. He is yeah, it's helped a lot.
I gotta go, so I'm gonna end this.
I do too. I have to go feed the dog
Yeah.
and take him
Yeah.
out.
There
Thanks,
were
Dan.
so many things she said that I wanted to. Oh, that I want to say something about that, but I was like, I'll just hold back.
You got it recorded, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, send me the recording, would you
I'll
please?
send it out, yeah. And
Yeah.
Debbie, we could do a recording too, as we discussed.
All right, listen,
Just
I'm gonna have
yeah.
to go, guys.
Okay.
All right,
See you,
take it
Nick.
easy.
Yeah.
Good to meet you, Nick. Good to meet you, Debbie.
Good to meet you.
Dan, it's
Take
always
care.
good to talk to you again.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll talk.
Talk to you later.
Bye.